The rain beat against the windows of the small apartment, a relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in Clara Evans' chest. She sat at the kitchen table, her wheelchair tucked close, her trembling hands folded over her lap. The once warm glow of her life, a bustling bakery, the smell of fresh bread, and the laughter she used to share with her husband, had dimmed into a cold silence. Across from her stood Daniel Evans, his arms crossed, his face twisted with disgust rather than pity. He didn't even try to lower his voice. "I can't do this anymore, Clara," he snapped. "I didn't marry a cripple. I married a woman who could give me something. But now you can't even feed me, let alone yourself." The words sliced through her like glass. She flinched, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the armrest of her chair. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm still me. I need time. The doctors—" He cut her off with a bitter laugh. "Doctor's time. We've wasted enough already. I'm not throwing my life away babysitting a woman who can't even stand." His phone buzzed. A smile flickered across his face, the kind he hadn't shown Clara in months. She knew that look. She had seen it before once when he thought she wasn't watching. The name Sophie Miller glowed faintly on the screen, her best friend. Betrayal wrapped itself tighter around her heart. Daniel shoved his phone into his pocket and grabbed his coat. "I'm leaving. Don't call me. Don't beg. I deserve better than this." The door slammed behind him, rattling the thin walls of the apartment. Clara's tears spilled freely now, rolling down her cheeks onto the cold table. She was alone. Alone in the wreckage of her own body, abandoned by the man who had vowed to stand beside her in sickness and in health. She wheeled herself slowly toward the window, watching his figure disappear into the storm. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly broken. The bakery they had once dreamed of running together was shuttered and the savings gone, her body failing her. In that moment, Clara believed life had stolen everything from her. What she didn't know, what Daniel couldn't possibly imagine, was that destiny was already moving quietly in the background. Papers locked away in a lawyer's safe bore her name. A fortune she had never dreamed of was waiting. $100 million. And soon the man who walked away into the rain would come crawling back on his knees, begging for the very woman he had called worthless. But by then, Clara Evans would no longer be the broken wife he abandoned. She would be something far stronger. Years earlier, the scent of sugar and warm bread had been the language of Clara Evans's happiness. She had grown up in her grandmother's kitchen, learning to knead dough with flour-dusted hands, while listening to stories of resilience passed down through generations. For Clara, baking was never just about food. It was about comfort, about creating sweetness in a world that often tasted bitter. When she met Daniel Evans, she believed she had found someone who would savor that sweetness with her forever. He was charming then, with a crooked smile and a quick wit that made her laugh until her sides ached. Clara remembered the night he proposed, sliding a modest silver ring onto her finger as they sat on the steps outside her grandmother's bakery. "One day," he promised, "we'll have a place of our own. You'll bake, I'll manage, and people will come from all over just to taste the Evans magic." Clara had believed every word. She worked double shifts, saved every dollar, and poured her heart into opening Sweet Haven Bakery. A tiny shop with pastel walls and the smell of cinnamon that wrapped around every customer like a hug. For a time, it was everything she had dreamed of. But dreams, Clara would learn, could curdle. Daniel had a restless streak. Managing the books bored him. He preferred long afternoons at the bar with friends, his charm spilling over into reckless spending. Bills piled up. Clara worked harder, taking custom orders late into the night, the muscles in her hands aching as she frosted cakes by lamplight. Still, she clung to hope. She told herself Daniel just needed time to adjust, that love was patience, that loyalty meant carrying each other's burdens. That illusion cracked at the first time she saw Sophie Miller lingering too long by Daniel's side. Sophie had been Clara's confidant since college, beautiful, confident, the kind of woman who drew eyes wherever she went. Clara invited her into their lives, freely, never suspecting betrayal could bloom so close to home. Sophie cooed over Clara's pastries, praised her work, and smiled too brightly whenever Daniel made a joke. Clara noticed but dismissed it, until whispers reached her, until she caught glimpses of text messages Daniel hid, until she saw the way Sophie touched his arm like she had a right to. She confronted Daniel once, voice trembling, but he waved it off with a laugh. "You're imagining things, Clara. Sophie's just a friend. You're overworked. Stop being paranoid." And Clara, exhausted and desperate to believe in her marriage, swallowed her doubts. Then came the accident. It was a rainy night, much like the one when Daniel left her. Clara had stayed late at the bakery delivering an order herself when the driver of a speeding truck swerved into her car. She woke days later in the hospital tube snaking around her, her body heavy and foreign. The doctors explained gently spinal cord damage, partial paralysis. She would need months, maybe years of rehabilitation. She might never walk again. Daniel was there at first, his face pale, his hands shaking as he held hers. But pity soured quickly. As the reality set in, his visits grew shorter, his patience thinner. He resented the mounting medical bills, the bakery closing the life they had built, unraveling like old cloth. And Sophie, Clara's supposed best friend, slipped closer to Daniel with every passing week. Clara saw it in their glances, in the way Sophie comforted him while Clara lay in bed, unable to move without help. The betrayal cut deeper than the accident ever had. Yet through it all, Clara clung to her grandmother's words, "Life can take your legs, your love, even your dreams. But it can't take your worth unless you give it away." In the bleak months after the accident, as Daniel drifted further and Sophie's shadow grew longer, Clara repeated those words to herself like a prayer. She didn't know then that fate had already planted a seed of redemption hidden in her family's past. That seed was a man named Henry Evans, her late uncle, a billionaire recluse, who had watched quietly from afar and who had already chosen Clara to inherit his fortune. $100 million that Daniel and Sophie could never imagine. The weeks after the accident stretched into months, each day a little heavier than the last. Clara Evans wheeled herself through the small apartment, the once bright space now dimmed by unpaid bills stacked on the counter, and silence where laughter used to be. Daniel grew restless. He resented the wheelchair, the endless therapy appointments, the way Clara's once bustling bakery sat, shuttered and dark. At first, he muttered under his breath. Then he snapped openly, throwing words like knives. "You're dragging me down, Clara. I didn't sign up to play nursemaid. Do you know how humiliating this is for me?" Clara bit her lip until it bled, choosing silence over tears. But the silence only fed his contempt. Sophie Miller came around more often, her perfume lingering long after she left. She offered to help Clara bringing groceries or tidying the apartment, her smile sugary sweet. But Clara noticed the way Daniel's eyes followed Sophie, the way Sophie's laughter filled the room, only when Clara struggled to wheel herself into place. One night, Clara overheard them in the kitchen. "You don't have to stay with her," Sophie whispered. "She's not the woman you married. She'll never be again." Daniel's reply was sharp, eager. "You think I don't know that I'm wasting my life here? With you, things could be different." Clara's chest constricted. She wanted to scream, to wheel herself into that room and tear down the illusion of friendship Sophie had woven. but she sat frozen, her heart cracking louder than any words could. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday evening. Daniel tossed his half-packed duffel onto the couch. "I'm leaving," he said flatly. "I've had enough. I can't live like this." Clara's voice trembled. "After everything, after vows, after promises. Vows don't pay rent." He cut in, his tone dripping with disdain. "You can't even feed me anymore. You're useless, Clara." Her tears blurred the world, but she forced the words out. "And Sophie? Is she your prize for abandoning me?" Daniel didn't deny it. His smirk was cruel. At least she can stand on her own 2 feet. The door slammed, and with it the life Clara had clung to shattered completely. The days that followed were a blur of humiliation and hardship. Landlords called about overdue rent. Utility companies threatened to cut the power. The bakery's lease expired quietly, its once bright windows now boarded up. Clara sold what little jewelry she had, rationed cheap canned soup, and counted coins for bus fare to physical therapy. Alone in the sterile hospital gym, she gritted her teeth as she tried to lift her legs, the machines groaning as if mocking her. Each failed attempt was another reminder of Daniel's words echoing in her head. Useless. At night, loneliness pressed harder than her physical pain. She stared at the empty side of the bed, her mind replaying Sophie's betrayal and Daniel's cruel smirk. There were moments she nearly gave up, moments when despair whispered that Daniel had been right. But then she remembered her grandmother's words, and she forced herself to light a small candle in the window, a flicker of defiance against the darkness. Meanwhile, Daniel and Sophie flaunted their new relationship openly. They dined in restaurants Clara and Daniel had once dreamed of visiting. Sophie wore new jewelry, her laughter captured in the glow of Daniel's phone as they snapped photos together. But beneath the sparkle cracks already formed, Daniel had no job, no ambition, only charm and greed. Sophie funded his whims with credit cards, convincing herself she deserved better than Clara's shadow. Yet whispers circulated about Daniel's arrogance, Sophie's vanity. The sheen of their affair dulled quickly, and while they spiraled into shallow indulgence, Clara faced her darkest hour with quiet strength. One evening, as Clara wheeled back from therapy under the cold glow of streetlights, a man in a tailored suit stepped from a sleek black car. "Mrs. Evans," he asked, his voice polite. "My name is Andrew Collins. I represent the estate of your late Uncle Henry Evans. May I have a word?" Clara blinked, stunned. Uncle Henry. She hadn't seen him in years. He had been a ghost at family gatherings, a recluse whose fortune was whispered about but never confirmed. Andrew smiled faintly, holding out an envelope embossed with a seal. "Your uncle left very specific instructions. You are the sole beneficiary of his estate." Her fingers shook as she took the envelope, her mind racing. She was penniless, abandoned, broken. But inside this envelope lay a truth that would turn her world upside down. $100 million. And though she didn't know it yet, that fortune would not only restore her life, but bring Daniel and Sophie crawling back, their pride stripped bare. The envelope sat heavy in Clara Evans' lap, as if it carried not just paper, but the weight of a life she had never imagined. Her hands trembled as she slid a finger beneath the seal, unfolding the thick parchment. "To my beloved niece Clara." Her eyes blurred as she read. Her uncle Henry, distant, eccentric, the kind of man whispered about at family gatherings, had left her the entirety of his estate. Properties across the country, stocks, bonds, accounts she couldn't begin to understand. And in bold, unmistakable numbers, the sum of her inheritance, $100 million. Clara's heart pounded. The world seemed to tilt, the sterile hospital walls around her, suddenly too small to contain the enormity of what she held. She looked up at Andrew Collins and the lawyer whose steady gaze anchored her spinning thoughts. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Why me?" Andrew's tone softened. "Because he admired your perseverance. Your uncle believed in strength, not the kind measured by wealth or power, but by character. He knew what you've endured. He wanted his legacy to go to someone who would use it wisely." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. For the first time since her accident, since Daniel's betrayal, since Sophie's cruel deceit, she felt something stronger than despair. She felt possibility. Andrew explained the logistics meetings with financial advisors, signatures on documents, the transfer of properties. But Clara barely heard him. Her mind replayed the words Daniel had hurled at her. "You're useless. You can't even feed me." Now, with a flick of a pen, she could feed not only herself, but entire communities. But Clara's lips curved not into a vengeful smile, but into something quieter resolve. This money wasn't for Daniel, not for Sophie, not even for revenge. It was a second chance at the life she thought she had lost. That night, Clara wheeled herself to the shuttered front of Sweet Haven Bakery. The pastel walls were faded, the glass smudged the sign chipped by rain. She pressed her hand against the cold door, memories flooding back, laughter of customers, the hum of ovens, the warmth of bread rising in the back. She whispered into the darkness, "I'm coming back." Days turned into weeks of careful planning. With Andrew's help, Clara purchased new equipment, hired a trusted team, and renovated the space. Sweet Haven would reopen not just as a bakery, but as a symbol of survival. At therapy, she pushed harder, sweat pouring down her brow as she fought to move her legs. Nurses encouraged her, astonished at her progress. Clara's determination burned brighter than ever. Every night she lit a single candle in her window, a ritual that reminded her of her grandmother's wisdom. Even the smallest light can break the darkest night. The flame became her silent vow she would not waste this gift. Meanwhile, whispers of her fortune began to ripple through town. Old neighbors eyed her with renewed curiosity. Acquaintances reached out with sudden warmth. And inevitably, word reached Daniel Evans and Sophie Miller. At first they laughed. "Clara rich, please." But then they saw the truth news reports of the Evans inheritance, the lawyer's official statement photographs of Clara at meetings with advisors. Daniel's smirk faltered. Sophie's painted lips tightened. They had abandoned Clara when she was at her weakest, certain she would fade into obscurity. Now she was not just surviving, she was rising. One evening, as Clara left therapy, she found Daniel waiting outside. His once arrogant frame seemed smaller, his clothes rumpled, his eyes desperate. "Clara," he began, his voice falsely tender. "I made a mistake. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle everything. But we can start over." Clara stared at him, her grip tightening on the wheels of her chair. Behind him, Sophie lingered in the shadows. Her arms crossed, her expression a mix of guilt and calculation. For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then she wheeled past them, her silence cutting deeper than words. Daniel reached after her, his voice breaking. "Please, I need you." But what Daniel didn't realize was that for the first time, Clara no longer needed him. The twist of fate had been revealed. The woman he called useless now held more power than he could ever dream of. And as Clara's candle flickered in her window that night, she knew the story was only beginning. Because soon, the world and Daniel would see that she wasn't just a crippled wife he abandoned. She was Clara Evans, heir to a fortune, survivor of betrayal, and the architect of her own redemption. The grand reopening of Sweet Haven Bakery was nothing like the humble celebration Clara Evans once imagined. The pastel walls gleamed fresh with paint, golden lights spilled through polished windows, and the scent of cinnamon rolls and frosted cakes drifted out into the crisp autumn air. Neighbors filled the sidewalks, children tugged their parents toward the trays of cookies, and reporters hovered near the entrance, eager to capture the miraculous comeback of the woman who had been left broken yet risen stronger than ever. Clara sat at the front counter, her wheelchair behind the glass display filled with pastries. A single candle flickered beside her cash register, its glow steady, symbolic, a reminder of the nights she had almost given up. Applause rang through the bakery as the ribbon was cut. Clara's name was on everyone's lips, her story inspiring strangers and friends alike. But not everyone had come to celebrate. Through the crowd pushed Daniel Evans, his once proud stride reduced to a nervous shuffle. His suit was wrinkled, his face hollow, and behind him trailed Sophie Miller, no longer radiant, but pale, her eyes darting nervously as the cameras turned their way. The whispers started immediately. Isn't that her husband? Didn't he leave her? And the best friend who betrayed her, Daniel forced a smile, stepping forward. Clara, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, I'm so proud of you. The room fell into a tense hush. Clara froze for a heartbeat, then lifted her chin, her voice calm. You have no right to be here. Daniel ignored the sting. He spread his hands, adopting a repentant tone. I was wrong, Clara. I was scared after your accident. I didn't know how to handle it. But I see now you're stronger than anyone. Please, let's put the past behind us. We can be a family again. Sophie stepped forward quickly, her voice syrupy but brittle. Clara, I never meant to hurt you. I was there for Daniel when you pushed him away, but it was a mistake. We both made mistakes, but we can make it right together. Gasps rippled through the bakery. Everyone had heard rumors of their betrayal, but hearing Sophie's half-admission in public was gasoline on fire. Clara's lips curved into a bitter smile. Together, yes, you were certainly together, while I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to move. Sophie's face drained of color. Daniel's voice rose desperate. Clara, please. I know about the inheritance. I know about the fortune Uncle Henry left you. But it doesn't matter, I love you. I've always loved you. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Clara's heart clenched, not with longing, but with disgust. She wheeled herself forward, her voice sharp as glass. Love, you called me useless. You left me when I needed you most. And now you want to come back because you smell money. Daniel flushed, his act unraveling. No, it's not like that. Yes, it is. Clara cut him off. If I were still broke, still struggling, you wouldn't be standing here. You'd still be with Sophie laughing about how pathetic I was. The silence was crushing. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every word, every expression. Clara reached for the candle on the counter, lifting it gently. The flame flickered steady and bright. This light kept me going, she said, her voice carrying through the bakery. It reminded me that no matter how dark it got, there was still hope. Daniel, Sophie, you tried to snuff me out. But look around. She gestured to the crowd, to the bakery alive with laughter and warmth. You failed. Applause broke out, rolling through the bakery like thunder. Daniel's composure collapsed. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his voice cracking. Clara, I beg you, please don't do this. I have nothing. I need you. Sophie stepped back, her arms crossed, disgust flashing across her face. Even now, loyalty between them was thin as paper. Clara's eyes glistened, but her voice remained strong. You had me once. You had my love, my trust, my devotion, and you threw it away. I don't hate you, Daniel. I pity you. but you will never have me again." The crowd cheered their support, washing over Clara like a wave. Daniel's sobs were swallowed by the noise, as reporters swarmed, recording the moment he had once believed impossible. The man who called her worthless, now begging at her feet. Clara set the candle back on the counter, its flame unwavering. She had no need for vengeance. The sight of Daniel on his knees, stripped of pride, was justice enough. For the first time in years, Clara felt whole, not because of the money, not because of revenge, but because she had chosen herself. The bakery still buzzed with applause when the cameras swung back to Daniel Evans, who knelt trembling on the tiled floor. His face, once smug and polished, was slick with sweat under the harsh glow of the spotlights. "Please, Clara," he stammered, his voice cracking. "It wasn't like that. I didn't know how to handle things after your accident. I made mistakes." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Murmurs rippled through the room. Didn't he run off with her best friend? He called her useless. Now he wants her back because she's rich. Clara's grip tightened on the arms of her wheelchair. Her gaze shifted toward Sophie Miller, who stood rigid, her painted lips pressed into a thin line. Clara's voice was steady, almost gentle, but it carried enough weight to hush the entire bakery. "Tell them the truth, Sophie. Tell them what you did." The color drained from Sophie's face. "Clara, please, this isn't the time." It's exactly the time, Clara cut in sharply. "While I lay in a hospital bed, unable to move, you were in my kitchen laughing with my husband, my best friend, my confidant. How many times did you come here pretending to help me while you were sneaking into his arms?" The crowd gasped. One woman near the counter shook her head. "That's vile." Another voice rose from the back. "And she has the nerve to show her face here." Sophie's composure cracked. Her hands shook her mask, slipping. "Daniel said you would never recover." She blurted, her voice desperate. "He said you'd be a burden forever. He told me he'd leave you eventually, whether I was there or not." The words hit like a hammer. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Daniel whipped his head toward Sophie, his eyes wide. "You idiot. Why would you say that?" But it was too late. The truth had spilled into the open, staining the air like smoke. Clara's voice rose not in anger, but in conviction. "You see," she told the crowd. "This is who they are. Two people who fed off my pain. They weren't satisfied with my suffering, they wanted to feast on it. And now when I stand again, when my life blooms brighter than ever, they crawl back hoping for scraps." Applause erupted, fierce and relentless. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust into Daniel's face. "Did you abandon your wife after her accident? Did you cheat with her best friend? Do you only want her now because of the inheritance?" Daniel's denials dissolved under the weight of Sophie's betrayal. He shouted, his words slurring together in desperation, but every syllable sounded like guilt. Sophie, cornered by the crowd's fury, shoved past him. "I never loved you anyway." She spat at Daniel, her voice shrill. "You were broke, lazy, and pathetic. I thought I'd at least get something out of it. But you couldn't even give me that." The bakery roared with shock. Daniel's face twisted, his last shred of pride shattered as Sophie stormed out into the street, chased by cameras. Now Daniel stood alone, broken before the woman he had called worthless. The same crowd that once pitied Clara now looked at him with contempt. Clara's voice was quiet, but every ear strained to hear. "Daniel, I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your poison any longer. But forgiveness doesn't mean welcome. You threw me away when I was at my lowest, and now you will live with the consequences of your choices." Daniel's eyes darted around, desperate, but found no ally. No Sophie, no sympathy. No escape from the truth. With cameras still rolling, security stepped forward gently but firmly, escorting him out of the bakery. His pleas dissolved into the noise of the crowd, his name forever tied to betrayal and disgrace. Clara wheeled back behind the counter, her candle flickering steadily beside trays of pastries. The room, though still buzzing, felt lighter, as though the last shadow had finally been cast out. She inhaled deeply the smell of sugar and cinnamon wrapping around her like armor. For years, Daniel and Sophie had tried to define her life by weakness. Now the truth had not only set her free, but left them both stripped bare, their greed and treachery exposed for all to see. And for Clara, this was no longer about revenge. It was about closure. The liars had been unmasked, the thieves had been shamed, and the woman they abandoned stood taller than ever, lit not by wealth, but by dignity. A month after the dramatic reopening of Sweet Haven Bakery, the little shop had become more than a business. It was a beacon. Families came not just for cakes or bread, but for the story behind the counter, the woman once abandoned and broken, who had risen with more strength than anyone expected. Every morning, the scent of fresh brioche and vanilla cream drifted out onto the street. And every evening, the glow of a small candle in the window shone steady, visible to anyone passing by. Clara Evans had found her rhythm again. Her inheritance gave her the means to rebuild. But it was her own hands, her own spirit, that gave life to the bakery. She hired young people from difficult backgrounds, offering them the chance she once wished someone had given her. She donated to rehabilitation programs, ensuring no patient felt as alone as she once had. And quietly, she began funding a scholarship in the name of Henry Evans, her uncle honoring the man whose belief in her had lit the first spark of this new chapter. One crisp afternoon, Andrew Collins visited the bakery. He found Clara arranging cupcakes in the display case, her movements graceful despite the wheelchair. "You've turned this place into something extraordinary," Andrew remarked. Clara smiled softly. "It isn't just a bakery anymore. It's a promise that broken doesn't mean finished, that sweetness can still be found in bitter times." Andrew nodded, his expression warm. "Your uncle would be proud." Clara's eyes glistened. She glanced at the candle by the register, its flame steady. "I hope so. Every night I light it, I think of him. Of what he left me, not just the money, but the reminder that someone believed I was worth more than my pain." Meanwhile, whispers of Daniel Evans and Sophie Miller faded into disgrace. Their affair had crumbled under the weight of public shame. Sophie, humiliated, left town. Daniel drifted from job to job, a shadow of the man who once sneered at Clara. Their names, once smug on Clara's lips, became nothing more than footnotes in her story. The woman they abandoned was no longer their victim. She was their mirror proof of how greed and betrayal always consume themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped low and golden light flooded the bakery, Clara rolled to a table near the window. A little girl tugged her mother's hand, pointing. "Mommy, that's the lady who can make wishes come true with cakes." Clara chuckled, warmth filling her chest. She handed the child a cupcake, topped with a swirl of cream and a single sugar flower. "Every wish begins with hope," she said gently. "Don't ever forget that." The child's eyes sparkled, and Clara felt a quiet joy take root. That night, when the bakery closed and the street outside grew quiet, Clara lit her candle once more. She placed it by the window, watching its flame dance. Next to it, she set a small, simple cupcake vanilla sponge with buttercream, her grandmother's recipe. It was her ritual now, a symbol of what she had endured, what she had built, and what she still hoped to share with the world. She whispered softly, "Not to Daniel, Not to Sophie, but to herself. I was never useless. I was always enough. The flame flickered steady and sure, casting a glow that reached beyond the glass. And so the story closed, not with a wealth flaunted, not with revenge savored, but with the quiet sweetness of dignity restored.